The recoil of a .45 caliber pistol is something you can't fake. Most people flinch, some brace, but the woman in the faded floral dress didn't move a millimeter. The SEAL commander thought she was just a confused civilian holding a rental gun, until he saw the ink on her wrist and the color drained from his face. The heat at the trigger guard was the only thing that felt real to Hannah Vance. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Virginia Beach, humid and sticky, the kind of air that clings to your skin like a wet wool blanket. The red sand shooting range was mostly empty, save for the hum of the ventilation fans and the rhythmic crack-crack of her own shooting. Hannah didn't look like she belonged there. She was 42, wearing a pair of oversized prescription glasses, a loose-fitting beige cardigan, and jeans that had seen better days. To the casual observer, she looked like a librarian, or perhaps a high school history teacher grading papers in her head. She stood in lane 4, holding a rented Sig Sauer P226 with a grip that seemed too casual, yet the paper target 25 yards away told a different story. The center mass was gone. It wasn't just a grouping. It was a singular, ragged hole. She lowered the weapon, cleared the chamber, and set it down on the bench with a mechanical slowness. She closed her eyes, exhaling a breath she felt she'd been holding since 2004. "Check your fire! Range is cold!" the rangemaster bellowed over the intercom. The door behind the safety glass swung open, bringing in a gust of hot air and the overpowering scent of testosterone and expensive cologne. A group of 6 men walked in. They were loud, moving with the distinct, rolling swagger of men who knew they were the predators in any given ecosystem. Hannah didn't turn around, but she knew the type. Active duty, likely Navy. The haircuts were high and tight, the forearms vascular, and the sunglasses were Oakley's. Leading the pack was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, Commander Samuel Breaker Thorne. At 38, Thorne was already a legend in the teams. He had operated in the Korengal Valley, taken hits in Ramadi, and trained half the current roster of Devgru. He was loud, arrogant, and currently laughing at a joke one of his subordinates, a fresh-faced lieutenant named Miller, had just cracked. They took the 3 lanes to Hannah's left. "All right, ladies," Thorne barked, dumping a heavy range bag onto the bench. "We're running drills. Double tap. Transition to secondary. If you're slower than me, you're buying the beers at the Trident tonight. If you miss the A zone, you're running 5 miles with a ruck tomorrow." The men laughed, loading their custom HK-416s and Glock 19s. They were efficient, fast, and lethal. The noise was deafening. Hannah calmly began reloading her magazines. Her fingers were calloused, though she hid them well. Thorne glanced over, noticing the middle-aged woman in the cardigan next to them. He smirked, nudging Miller. "Hey, watch your brass, Lieutenant. Don't want to scare the soccer mom next door." Miller chuckled. "Roger that, boss. Think she's lost?" Thorne leaned over the divider, his voice dripping with condescending charm. "Mum, it gets pretty loud over here. We're running some high-caliber drills. If you want, I can ask the rangemaster to move you to the pistol lanes on the other side. Might be quieter for whatever you're shooting." Hannah didn't look up. She slid a fresh magazine into the well of the P226. The click was audible even over their noise. "I'm fine, thank you," she said softly. Her voice was raspy, like dry leaves skittering on pavement. Thorne's smile faltered slightly at the dismissal. He wasn't used to being ignored. "Just looking out for your safety, Mom. That rental gun kicks like a mule if you don't have the wrist strength." Hannah finally turned her head. Through the thick lenses of her glasses, her eyes were a startling, icy grey. They were dead eyes, the kind Thorne had only seen on men who had stared into the abyss for too long. "Commander," she said, reading the rank on his mood, but acknowledging the lack of insignia on his civilian shirt. Focus on your front sight post. You're jerking the trigger on your reset. The silence among the SEALs was instant. Miller's jaw dropped. Thorne blinked, his face flushing with a mix of amusement and irritation. "Excuse me?" Thorne laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "I think I know how to shoot, sweetheart. I've been doing this for 15 years. "Then you've been doing it wrong for 15 years, Hannah said, turning back to her lane. "Range is hot." Before Thorne could retort, Hannah raised the pistol. She didn't take a combat stance. She didn't brace. She simply extended her arm. Bang, 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 bang. 4 shots in under 2 seconds. Thorne looked down range. At 50 yards, a distance most handguns struggled with, 4 small steel plates spun wildly on the spinner target. She hadn't missed. The SEALs went quiet. That wasn't luck. That was machine-like precision. Thorne narrowed his eyes. His ego was bruised, and his curiosity was piqued. "Not bad," he grunted, stepping closer. "Who taught you to shoot? Husband a cop?" Hannah ejected the mag. "Something like that." She began to pack up. As she reached for the brass casings scattered on the concrete floor, a habit of old reloaders, her cardigan sleeve rode up her right arm. It was just for a second. Thorne was watching her hands, looking for a tremor, a sign of nerves. Instead, he saw the ink on the inside of her right forearm. It was faded, scar tissue running through parts of it, but the design was unmistakable to a historian of special warfare. It wasn't the standard Budweiser eagle and trident. It was a black dagger wrapped in a wreath of thorns with a Latin phrase curling underneath, Nemo residebit, no one left behind, but inverted. Thorne froze. His breath hitched in his throat. He knew every unit patch, every unofficial morale logo from Vietnam to the War on Terror, but he had only seen that specific design once in a classified file regarding a dissolved experimental program from the early 90s, a program that officially never existed. "Wait," Thorne said, his voice dropping the arrogance, replaced by a sudden, chilling seriousness. He reached out, grabbing her wrist before he could stop himself. "Where did you get that?" Hannah flinched, not out of fear, out of reflex. She twisted her arm, breaking his grip with a technique that was pure Krav Maga leverage, sending the 220-pound commander stumbling back 2 steps. She pulled her sleeve down instantly. "Don't touch me," she whispered. The grey eyes were no longer dead. They were blazing. "That tattoo," Thorne stammered, looking at his men who were now tense, hands hovering near their waistbands. "That's the chaotic neutral insignia. Task Force 121. The Valkyrie experiment. That's impossible. They were all wiped out in Mogadishu." Hannah picked up her range bag. "You're mistaken, Commander. It's just a drawing my son made." She walked out of the range, her gait changing from the shuffle of a librarian to the smooth, prowling stride of a jungle cat. Thorne watched her go, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Boss?" Miller asked, stepping up. "Who the hell was that?" Thorne stared at the door. "A ghost, Miller." "We just saw a ghost." Commander Samuel Thorne was not a man who let things go. By 1900 hours, he was back at Little Creek Base, sitting in a dark office, illuminated only by the glow of his SIPRnet terminal. He had skipped beers at the Trident. The image of that tattoo was burned into his retinas. He knew what he had seen. The Valkyrie program was a rumor whispered about by the old salts, the master chiefs who had served in Panama and the Gulf. The story went that in 1993, the Pentagon authorized a black budget test, an integration of female operatives into Tier 1 assets, not for support, but for direct action assassination. They were called the Sirens. Thorne typed in his clearance codes. He had top-secret clearance, enough to see almost anything. He ran a facial recognition search based on the security footage he had pulled from the gun range, a favor called in from a buddy at the Virginia Beach PD. The system churned. Match found. Name, Hannah Jenkins. Status, civilian. Occupation, archivist, Virginia Beach Public Library. Bullshit, Thorne muttered. He dug deeper, cross-referencing her biometrics with military databases. The screen flashed red. Access denied. Level 5 clearance required. Eyes only. Majestic. Thorne leaned back, rubbing his temples. Majestic clearance? That was CIA SAD, Special Activities Division, level. That was presidential. He picked up his secure line and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. It rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. It was Admiral McRaven, Retentuok, a man who didn't take social calls. "This line is for emergencies, Samuel." The Admiral's voice was calm but sharp. "Admiral, I need to confirm on a visual I made today," Samuel said, cutting to the chase. "I saw a woman. Civilian sector. She had the thorns and dagger ink, the Valkyrie patch." The line went dead silent. For 10 seconds, Samuel thought the call had dropped. "Samuel," the Admiral's voice was suddenly very tired. "Forget you saw her. She outshot me, sir. She moved like she was green team. If we have a rogue operator—" "She is not rogue," McRaven snapped, his composure breaking. "She is the only reason you're alive to make this phone call, son." Samuel froze. "What?" "Operation Silent Echo, Kandahar, 2009. You were a pinned-down lieutenant. Your squad was compromised. You took a mortar round. Remember who pulled you out?" "We were extracted by a British SAS team. I was unconscious." "That's the official report," the Admiral said. "The truth is, the SAS were 2 hours out. You were saved by a lone asset who was embedded in the village as a medic. She carried you 3 miles uphill to the LZ while taking fire. She took a round in the shoulder to shield you. That woman is Hannah Vance. Code name, Spectre." Samuel felt the room spin. He remembered the medic. He remembered the smell of blood and dust, and a soft voice telling him to stay awake. He had always assumed it was a hallucination. "She's retired, Samuel," the Admiral continued, his voice softening. "She paid her dues in blood. She lost her husband in the same program. She just wants to be left alone. Do not engage. That is an order." "Yes, sir," Samuel whispered. He hung up. He sat in the darkness for a long time. The woman he had mocked, the soccer mum he had offered to help. She was the warrior who had carried his broken body out of hell. He stood up, grabbing his keys. He had to apologize. He didn't care about the order. Honor demanded it. He drove to the address listed on her civilian file. It was a small, unassuming bungalow on the outskirts of town. It was dark. As he pulled up, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The front door of Hannah's house was kicked in. Splinters of wood lay on the porch. A black SUV with no plates was idling in the driveway, and 2 men in tactical gear that looked Russian, were dragging a struggling figure out of the house. It was Hannah. She was fighting, but she was zip-tied and had clearly been tased. Her movements were sluggish. Samuel didn't think. He didn't call for backup. He didn't check his rules of engagement. He reached under his passenger seat and pulled out his personal sidearm, a customized 1911. He racked the slide. "Not on my watch," he growled. He exited the truck, moving into the shadows. The soccer mum had saved his life in Kandahar. Now, the commander was going to return the favor. But as Samuel moved to flank them, he saw Hannah stop struggling. She stood up straight, even with her hands bound behind her. She looked at the Russian holding her arm, and Samuel saw her lips move. He was close enough to hear her whisper, You boys brought the wrong zip ties. Snap. With a violent torque of her wrists, the plastic ties shattered. She had pre-stressed them, or used a friction saw hidden in her sleeve. In one fluid motion, she snatched the pistol from the Russian's holster, spun him around as a human shield, and fired 2 shots into the driver of the SUV. Samuel lowered his gun, stunned. She didn't need saving. She was just getting started. The driveway of the suburban bungalow had turned into a kill zone. Samuel didn't hesitate. As Hannah neutralized the driver, Samuel double-tapped the second operative, who was reaching for an AKS-74U slung across his chest. The mercenary dropped like a sack of cement. "Clear right," Samuel shouted, instinct taking over. He wasn't the commander giving orders anymore. He was a teammate in the stack. Hannah didn't look surprised to see him. She didn't thank him, either. She simply pivoted, scanning the tree line with the situational awareness of a predator. "There's a sniper in the north tree line. 2 more bogies approaching from the rear alley. We need cover. Inside. Now." They moved as one entity. Samuel laid down suppression fire toward the trees, while Hannah kicked open her front door. Not the one that was broken, but a reinforced steel side entry hidden behind a trellis of ivy. Once inside, the transformation was jarring. The exterior was a quaint grandmother's home. The interior was a fortress. The hallway walls were reinforced with Kevlar paneling, disguised as wainscoting. "Kitchen," Hannah commanded. "Grab the bag under the sink." Samuel slid into the kitchen, expecting cleaning supplies. Instead, he pulled out a heavy duffel bag containing flashbangs, extra magazines for his 1911, and a pristine MP7 submachine gun. "Who are these guys?" Samuel asked, checking the chamber of the MP7. "Spetsnaz?" "Mercenaries," Hannah said, ripping the hem of her dress to bind a shallow cut on her arm. "Kruger Group. Ex-Russian Alpha Group hired by private interests. They don't want me. They want the location of the graves." "What graves?" Hannah looked at him, her grey eyes filled with a haunting sorrow. "The rest of my team. The Valkyries. The government erased them, Samuel. No markers, no flags. Just holes in the desert. I'm the only one who knows where the bodies are buried. These men, they work for the warlord who killed them. He wants to dig them up. Trophies." A heavy thud shook the house. They were breaching the back door. "They want a fight?" Samuel racked the bolt on the MP7, a dark grin spreading across his face. "Let's give them a war." "No," Hannah said, flipping a switch under the kitchen island. A low hum filled the room. "We don't fight fair. We're ghosts, remember?" Suddenly, the lights in the house cut out. At the same moment, the sprinkler system engaged, but it wasn't water. It was a dense, pepper-based riot gas. Coughs and screams erupted from the back room as the mercenaries breached. They were blinded, choking. Hannah didn't need night vision. She knew every floorboard of her home. She moved through the smoke like a phantom. Samuel watched in awe as she engaged the threat. It wasn't the brute force of a seal. It was a terrifyingly efficient dance. A knife to a tendon here, a judo throw there, a suppressed shot to the knee. Within 30 seconds, 3 mercenaries were incapacitated on her living room floor, but the radio on one of the fallen men crackled. "Team 2, engage. Level the structure. RPG fire authorized." Samuel's eyes widened. "RPG? Hannah, we have to move. This house is about to be a crater." "Not yet," Hannah said, her voice calm amidst the chaos. She moved to the fireplace and pulled a loose brick. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifle. Disassembled. "You have a 50 cal in your chimney?" Samuel asked, incredulous. "I like to be prepared," she murmured, her hands flying as she assembled the massive weapon in seconds. "There's an armored SUV coming down the street. It has the launcher." "Buy me 10 seconds, Commander. Keep the hallway clear." "Copy that." Samuel moved to the hallway, MP7 raised. 10 seconds, Spectre. Make them count." Samuel held the hallway. Bullets shredded the drywall around him as the second wave of mercenaries poured fire through the windows. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and loving every second of it. He was fighting alongside a myth. 5 seconds, he yelled, changing mags. 3. Hannah's voice floated from the living room. 1. Boom. The sound of the Barrett 50 firing inside a closed room was like a grenade going off. The overpressure knocked framed photos off the walls. Outside, the armored SUV driving up the street didn't stand a chance. Hannah's round punched through the engine block, shattering the axle and sending the vehicle careening into a telephone pole. The RPG gunner in the sunroof was thrown clear, the weapon skittering uselessly across the pavement. Silence fell over the neighborhood. The remaining mercenaries, seeing their heavy support destroyed, realized the payout wasn't worth the mortality rate. Tires screeched as their backup van peeled away, retreating into the night. Samuel slumped against the wall, his ears ringing. He looked over at Hannah. She was standing amidst the ruin of her living room, the massive rifle resting on a beanbag chair she had dragged to the window. She looked small again. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the exhaustion of a woman who had been fighting for 20 years. Sirens wailed in the distance. The local police, and likely the FBI, were inbound. "You should go, Commander," Hannah said softly, not looking at him. "This will get messy. You have a career. Don't let my history stain it." Samuel holstered his weapon. He walked over to her, stepping over the shattered glass. "I was a lieutenant in Kandahar," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was bleeding out in the dirt. You put a tourniquet on my leg. You gave me your morphine. You carried me." Hannah finally looked at him. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "You were heavy." "I never got to say thank you," Samuel said. He stood tall, his posture shifting from combatant to officer. "And I'm not leaving you. Not this time. Nemo residebit." No one left behind. When the police arrived, they found a Navy SEAL commander sitting on the front porch, drinking a glass of water, guarding the woman inside. When the FBI tried to take custody of Hannah, a call came through from Washington. Admiral McRaven had been busy. The cleanup crew arrived 10 minutes later. The incident was classified. The mercenaries were erased from the record. 6 months later. The Red Sand shooting range was busy on a Saturday. Commander Samuel Thorne walked in, but he wasn't with his usual loud crew. He was alone. He walked to lane 4. Hannah was there. She was wearing the same beige cardigan, reloading her magazines with that same methodical rhythm. She looked up as he approached. Samuel placed a small velvet box on the bench next to her ammo. "What is this?" she asked. "I pulled some strings," Samuel said quietly. Dug into the archives, found the original citations that were redacted. Hannah opened the box. Inside sat the Navy Cross. It was the second highest military decoration for valor. It had never been officially awarded to her because her unit didn't exist. "For Kandahar," Samuel said, "and for keeping the ghosts at bay." Hannah stared at the medal. Her hand trembled just slightly. For the first time, the steel in her eyes melted, replaced by a glistening tear she refused to let fall. She snapped the box shut and slipped it into her pocket. "You're a stubborn man, Commander," she said, though her voice was warm. "I learned from the best," Samuel smirked. "Care for a wager. 10 rounds, 50 yards. Loser buys dinner." Hannah picked up her pistol. She adjusted her glasses. She looked at the target, then back at Samuel. "Steak," she said. "Rare." Samuel chuckled, drawing his weapon. "You're on." She raised her gun. The recoil was violent, but she didn't move. She was just a quiet woman at the range. But to the man standing next to her, she was the giant upon whose shoulders he stood. Bang. Dead center. This story reminds us that true heroes often walk among us in silence, unrecognized until the moment calls for them. If Hannah and Samuel's story moved you, please hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story of valor. Share this with someone who respects our veterans. Until next time.